This episode is brought to you by Boat Trader, America's largest boating marketplace. Whether you're buying, selling, or upgrading, the Boat Trader app makes it easy. With the biggest selection of new and used boats from dealers and private sellers. Browse, compare, and even apply for financing. All in one place. Download the Boat Trader app and start your search today.
Hey guys, this is Melissa Bachman. Are you ready to stop spooking deer before it's even time to hunt them? Then you need the new Flex S Dark cellular trail camera from SpyPoint. With a no-glow flash option, long-lasting solar power, and a ton of settings that can be changed anytime through the SpyPoint app, there are no more excuses for letting your deer get wise before the season even starts. So check it out for yourself and see why the SpyPoint Flex S Dark is the unstoppable and undetectable scouting tool you need for your next hunt.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And if you haven't seen it yet, yesterday or just this week, Huntworth has dropped their new Silent X cold weather stealth gear. Ultra quiet, windproof clothing. So if you are familiar with like the old Berber style, like Cabela's stuff, think of that. That's windproof with the heat boost. So just that super quiet, super warm clothing. That's what's coming out here from Huntworth. So really excited about that. That's one of the things that has been like one of, like say, Uncle Frank's favorite is the that Berber style jacket, especially for those late season hunts with the heat boost. Just an excellent piece of gear. So get over to Huntworth Gear, check that out, and while you're cruising the internet, check out the Latitude page. The Method 3 saddle has dropped today. And that is the next generation of the ultimate in comfort for, you know, that 2-panel saddle system. Kind of the originators coming back to improve their design. Super cool material. And then they've got a bunch of other stuff. They dropped their second generation backpack straps for all you tree stand guys. And it's funny because when the first ones came out and some of the straps on their other packs, they've got a lot of feedback on that. And then these Gen 2 straps have improved on just about everything that everyone said. So check them out over there at latitude.com. Use code BHC to save 15%. Big Shot Targets, you can save 10% there with code BCP. And then still at Painted Arrow, BHC15 will save you 15% over there. So just talked with Brian over at Canati. I think we're going to have them on the podcast here coming up leading into the season. But Canati and Zinger, I can't say enough good things about those. Just good quality people. Hope and Austin over at Genesis 3D, quality people, just amazing stuff. I would say by September 1st, I'm going to have a new email going out to the Patreons for details on the Patreon hunt. Had a couple inquiries about out-of-state stuff, so I'll get all of that out there. And, so this podcast, most people think of Dan Infalt, the hunting beast, as the big buck killer. And not many people know that he is very passionate about bear hunting. And this was a fun podcast for both Dan and I, because I've always said that I think that there's two different Dan Infalts. The one that you hear on the podcast, and then the one that you get to meet in person. Sometimes he's, seems a little dry. I've said it. I've told him to his face. He seems a little bit intimidating when you listen to him, like on podcasts. He seems a little gruff. And this one, I feel like peels back the curtain a little bit, and he's a little bit more enthusiastic about it because he never gets to talk really about bear hunting. So Even if you're not really into bear hunting or anything, just some excellent information and just a fun podcast. Great to talk to Dan as always. So this one, I know you guys are going to enjoy it. Say it every week. Thanks for listening. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And today we're talking to a guy that you definitely have heard about if you've been following along with anything in the mobile hunting space for the last 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. But Mr. Dan Infalt, how are you tonight, Dan?
Doing good.
So we're going to talk tonight. I've said on the podcast a bunch, and I think I mentioned it to you in person, but I said, when I draw my bear tag, I said, I'm going to see if I can get Dan on to talk some bear hunting. So what is your history with bear hunting? Like, when were you introduced to bear hunting?
Geez, it would have probably been the early 90s. My first hunt was in Wisconsin with hounds. It's the only hound hunt I ever did. And then after that, I really kind of got a kick out of bear hunting, but I like the chess game more. And got into the bait hunting. And my first bear in Wisconsin was an absolute monster, and that just got me hooked.
So I haven't talked to many people who have run hounds or hunted behind that. And so how far into your journey as chasing big bucks was it when you went on this hound hunt?
I probably had, half a dozen big bucks under my belt and a lot of mediocre ones, early 90s, I was probably right in my prime as a big buck hunter. Matter of fact, when I got my first bear, I was hunting a really wide 11 pointer that was just an absolute monster. I was watching him and coming out on a daily basis, glassing him from back in the wilderness. And I went on this bear hunt, and I shot that bear on the day before opening day, raced home, didn't even go home. I left the bear in the truck, went out there and shot that buck. So I was right in the prime of my big buck hunting when I started bear hunting.
And so what got you into it, or what was that like? Because they seem, especially even with hunting hounds, and I guess from a layman or for someone who hasn't done it, it seems like diametrically opposed to like methodically finding where a deer lives and, basically waiting for him to just step out.
Well, that's a good point. But where I lived and hunted for deer, there were no bears. So I had to travel to bears. So bears were kind of like an exotic thing to me at the very start. So it was like going off to hunt, same thing as if you went on a caribou hunt or something. So I was going to go out and experience bear hunting, So I went out and I hired a hound guy when I got my tag and got my bear. And like you said, it was a little bit different, a little out of my realm, the way I hunt. And that's when I decided to try the bait hunting. Okay.
And so for the bait hunting thing, like for you, it seems like, that's not the way that you deer hunt. So what made you, you had mentioned that it was like the chess game of bait.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to dive like kind of deeper into that, because I'm just starting to figure it out. Not figure it out. I'm starting to like dip my toes into it. And it's like, I don't know. There are some guys that make it seem like, oh, it's just so easy. You just got to do this. And then there's guys that are like, these bears have this giant range and all this stuff. So what makes, I guess the first year that you tried setting out, stepping your foot into the bait game, like what was your strategy and how did it go that first time?
The very first time I used baits, I drew a tag in Wisconsin, and I went up to the Wausau area. And actually, I wasn't going to go to the Wausau area, but my good friend Dave Dockstader came over, unaware about me bear hunting. And he asked me if I knew anybody who had a tag for that area. And I said, well, I happen to have a tag. And he showed me a picture of a bear at his brother's cabin. And his brother had a deer feeder in the back of his cabin, which was basically an antique bathtub, one of those ones that got the little claw feet,
Mm-hmm.
and he had it full of corn. And his bear was standing over the top of it with 2 legs on one side of it, 2 legs on the other side of it, with the thing in the middle, eating the corn. And it was just an absolute monster bear. And I said, I'd like to go after it, because his brother didn't have a tag. I mean, you only get a tag so often in Wisconsin. So I went up there and followed this bear's trail that went to this feeder where they were seeing it, across the road and into through a little bit of open forest for about I want to say 75 yards, maybe 100, and then it hit swamp. And I figured the bear wasn't that far away, so I put the bait right next to that swamp and figured out a tree or whatever, and put out another bait in another spot, so I had a backup. And right away, that big bear started hitting it. And when I showed up, I got a surprise, because I didn't realize that the area got really crowded, that people came in there to camp and hunt right there. Then when I showed up opening weekend to hunt, I had Dave's brother baiting for me because of how far of a drive it was. And he tells me that the bear hadn't been in since last time I was up there, which was a week ago or something like that. So the bait hasn't been touched. And there's just guys everywhere. And this bait is only, 100 yards off the road. Granted, it was a dirt road. That's why, and it was really rural. But I didn't realize it was going to get that kind of pressure. And so I was up there and I was kind of pouting about it. And I was sitting there and it got like noon, and those 2 were second shifters, and they're sleeping. And I'm in a cabin with no electricity and stuff. And I'm just sitting there just staring at the walls, and it starts, I'm just bored shitless. So I just went out and climbed up the tree, and I'm just thinking, oh man, this is ruined. And the double kicker was that second bait I had out. He thought I was so interested in that bear that he invited some friend to hunt that. So I really didn't have a second bait anymore. So I climbed up that tree, and I'm sitting there in that tree, and I can see where somebody pulled a camper into the woods 100 yards from me. And there's like 4 guys over there talking and playing music and stuff and getting ready for bear season, I guess. But they're only 100 yards from me, and they're in the woods where there wasn't anything before. They pulled the camper right into the woods. And then there's people walking up and down that road with bows and stuff, and their dogs and stuff, where there wasn't those people when I set that up, and when I was baiting. And it starts raining. And I'm like looking at the sky, like, what else could go wrong? And you're gonna like this. All of a sudden, these people that had that camper in the woods start cranking music. It was AC/DC Hell's Bells. I'll never forget this. And it's ringing through the woods, and I'm like, really? And it's starting to rain. I look up at the sky, and I look down, and there's that giant bear walking past me. And he didn't stop at the bait. He was heading right up the trail for that stupid feeder in the middle of the day with all that shit going on. And I just drew the bow and shot him. That was my first bait bear. And that bear weighed 500 pounds dressed. When I got it, guys are with their first ones back in those days. I got it scored. And it was the biggest bear in Lincoln County at when I scored it. But somebody put one in the books after that was killed before mine. But at the time I scored it, it was the biggest one in the county. So now it's like number 5 or something in that county. But it was a pretty big bear. It's still my biggest one.
That's wild for like a ton of different reasons. I mean, what do you take away from that other than, you have to be in the woods to kill them?
Yeah. The biggest takeaway of that is, and the biggest thing it's did for me over the years, is that when you're down and out, you know that anything can happen at any time. And that's not the only time I've had something crazy happen, where like you think you're done. There was a hunt in Minnesota. The very first time I went to Minnesota, Minnesota is where I love Minnesota for bear hunting. But the very first time I went there, a friend of mine was hunting there, and he was killing bears and stuff, and he invites me over. So I go there, and he had put out some baits and stuff, and we went around and looked at them, and none of the baits were getting hit at all. And we sat up there for 3 days and had one bait get hit. And when we checked the camera, it's a sow and cubs, and nothing else in 3 days. And I was getting itchy. And he says, well, back by his house, which was like the non-quota area where you can just, I had a tag that I applied for and got in this area, but I could go to the non-quota area and hunt too, where you don't have to apply for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I have a bait down there. Actually, had 2 baits down there, and there's another guy hunting with us. And he goes, we can go try those and see what's happening. But it was like, halfway across the state. And we ran down there, and we get there, and the one bait had been hit, and the camera showed a small bear. And I was like, I don't know. And then this other guy was really excited to shoot it. And I said, well, you hunt the bear. And then I went and set this bait that hadn't been hit since he put it out, like, I don't know, like 15, 20 days earlier. It had not been hit at all. So we went and sat on his bait, and I'm sitting there, and this guy's excited to have me hunt with him, and I just says, hey, when this hunt's done, I'm packing up. I mean, this is kind of stupid. And he's like, I understand and stuff. And I turned my head away from him, and he goes, bear, bear, bear. And the guy's kind of a goofball, and I thought he was joking with me. And I just turned my head around like, really, you gonna fuck with me now? And I look, and he's looking at a bear coming in from downwind, smelling at the bait, walks right in, right underneath us, looks up in the tree, sees us, and runs. And I pulled the bull back, and it hesitated as it jumped a log, and I put one right through its heart. So, like I said, those types of hunts really teach you that bear can come in at any time.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm just thinking through this, like, because of the thought process is you want to find the hot bait. You want to make sure that there's, even bears in the area, and how different that is from the manner in which, you definitely deer hunt, but, kind of everybody's, you want to be in the right area. You want to be there, where these animals are, and to just, cause it's always the high percentage hunt, right? So how, at what point do you, I mean, I guess, have you had instances where you have just hung it up and said, no matter what effort I've put in, it's not worth going in blind or wasting my time?
Not really. I've never had it where I give up, at least on bears. But there's been times when I'm patient. Like I got wrong winds and stuff. The baits aren't being hit real active, and I know it's about to hit, and I'm going to have the perfect wind the next day or something. I won't sit the baits, or I'll go sit a bait that the wind's right and nothing's been hitting it. I'd rather sit that than, because I really believe that first strike is important with bears. Once they know they're being hunted, a mature bear is really hard to kill. Once he knows that you've been in a tree trying to kill him, it's really hard to get him to come in daylight and not know you're there. So I've been patient, but I don't think I've ever given up. And I think part of the reason I didn't give up is because of those early hunts when, like that Minnesota one, I was about to give up. I still had a couple days and I was going to leave early. And it just, on a dime, this thing just smells the bait and comes into it. So I'm sure he was just downwind walking, smelled that bait, and just came straight into it. He's coming straight from downwind, straight at the bait. So it was first time coming in. And I tell you, I always run cameras on baits, and that's so important because it teaches you. Some guys won't put it on until after their baits are being hit or something. I put a camera on every single bait, and I want to know what goes on there all the time. And that's really a learning tool. And one thing I've learned over the years is probably 2 out of 3 big bears, when they first hit your bait the very first time, it's in daylight. I don't know why that is, but I've talked to others about that, other really great bear hunters like Mike Foss and some other guides, and they've told me the same thing. that when I mention it, they're like, yeah, I've seen that too. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, they're coming in daylight the first time they hit. So if you're sitting there when that first hit is, you got a pretty good chance.
So when you're setting up these baits, like what is it that you're looking for? And then like, what is your strategy? Like what, some people use scent, some people use dog food, some people use, they're just about everything. It seems like a bear will come into, but when you say that it's like a chess game, like, can you elaborate on how you set it up and I guess how you set the board?
Okay. So what I do is before I go to an area to bear hunt, I'm going to study some maps. I'm really going to look at where the swamps are and stuff. And if you're in the Midwest, you're in Wisconsin, Minnesota, or Michigan, somewhere in this area, the bears are going to be down in swamps. They're not going to be up on high ground much. I mean, there's some exceptions, but for the most part, you're going to want to look for swamps. They're going to go down into those low, cool swamps. In September, when you hunt them, it's pretty warm out, and they want to stay cool. They're like these little heat factories, So, you ever walk into those big forests? You walk down into like a cedar or pine swamp, and you get into where it's dark, and all of a sudden the temperature just drops like 10 degrees. You can physically feel it. They like spots like that, and then they like high grass and that stuff. So if you think about how deer bed in the swamp and the points that go out into the swamps or the points that come out, the little land features and stuff, bears do the same thing, but they, with this grass and stuff. So what I try to do is I try to find a spot where a bear would want to be. Without a lot of scouting and stuff, a lot of times there isn't a bear laying there. You know what I mean? Or a bear bed there or something with the number of bears in some of these spots. But if you find a spot where he would do it, that's where you want to put your bait. Because what you want to do is get that bear to hold up real close to the bait and guard it. So then I'll put the bait, preferably, and I'll look for land features where my wind is going to blow usually horizontal to the swamp. So you want to be up into the hardwoods, just out of it, right? You want them to walk out of that brush into this woods, but just a short distance. So I want that wind blowing up or down that swamp. And the reason for that is that when that bear comes in, a mature bear wants to know if there's danger there. I mean, you think about it. The mature boars we're shooting, you get them aged. They make you age them in a lot of the places where we hunt. You got to send a tooth in. So I get the ages back, and my bears have been, 12, 15 years old. The last few I've shot, they don't get to be 12 or 15 years old by just running straight into a bait. Most guys are shooting the first bear they see. So a bear that's 12 or 15 knows his way around baits because there's baits everywhere. And what they do is by the time they get older, now the little ones will come running right in. And that fools people. Are like, oh, there's bears just come running right into baits. Baits are easy. And yeah, okay. But the big ones, they circle to the downwind side. Sometimes they do a full circle. Sometimes they just go down to where they're downwind of the bait. And they don't know where you're hunting, so they just know the bait. Unless you're real obvious about where you're hunting, then they'll know where you're hunting. And they'll go downwind to where you're hunting. But they come around to the downwind side of the bait. They smell it. And when they can smell the bait, what they're smelling for is to see if there's somebody over there or some danger. And it might not even be that they're smelling for a person. Bears are very territorial. They fight each other. Even a dominant bear doesn't want to walk into a fight without knowing there's somebody there, right? Mm-hmm. So he comes to the downwind side, smells to see if it's safe, and then he comes in. And then you're on a just off wind, further back. So then when I set up a bait, when I go in there and I pick out this spot, obviously you're looking around for trees and stuff, right? But immediately I set up the camera. I tend to set it up on my side of the bait, the axis I'm coming in on, right? And I make sure I pick out my trees. I walk to each of the trees that I might hunt out of. There might be, usually there's one, sometimes there's two, maybe even three, based on what winds I could hunt there on, right? Mm-hmm. And I will make sure that my trail to that bait, even if I'm going way out of my way, goes to each one of those trees. And every single time I bait, I will go to each one of those trees, walk right past the base of it, and I'll walk to that camera and walk to the bait so that my routine never changes. And those bears will walk up and down your trail. They'll figure out where you're at. If you come in there And we've seen it over and over again. You go to an outfitter, or you go to some guy that's baiting for you or something, and you change your routine. You walk in there and you walk up to the bait, or you walk around, you set up a camera, or you go put up a tree stand right before the hunt, and those bears will just go dark. And everybody will be like, the acorns are dropping. But, we're getting action and other people aren't. In Minnesota really shows that. We go up there, everybody's struggling except for us. My crew up there just hammers the bears. And a lot of the other guys are struggling. And it's because of how we do that. Those bears are really more meticulous at figuring you out than people realize. They sneak around, they check they check your cross trails. They circle the baits, they smell if you're there. A lot of times the real big boars, what they'll do on an active bait is they'll bed. Like if you give them a position where they can, you're not in the middle of a hardwoods or something, right? Mm-hmm. You give them a position where it's a nice, thick enough, wet enough, low enough, cool enough, shaded enough area, next to the bait. They'll go lay up, say 75, 100 yards from that bait, and they'll just monitor it. They'll know when you bait. And sometimes some bears will come right in right after you bait. You'll see them in the camera, like looking up the trail where you had left. Some of them will shy away and not come back for a while. But what you'll see also on the camera is you'll see a little bear come in. Then all of a sudden that big bear will be on the camera because he came charging in because he's guarding that bait. That's his food. He's guarding it. Like if you ever seen those documentaries about grizzly bears, and you'll see them just lay on their food, just guard it, and really protect it. Black bears kind of do the same thing. So you want to get that where that bear can hole up right there and guard that bait. And then you want to be able to sneak to that tree, on your trail, get in there with him sitting there and have him just waltz in there.
And so how often are you baiting? How much volume are you baiting? And then, I've heard some guys, they'll say, for the guides or whatever, they'll have, they'll hear the four-wheeler come in, hear the four-wheeler leave, all of that stuff for the same noise, same routine, like you're saying. So how do you do that, and how do you manage going in and out of there, and how often?
Well, the first thing I would say is that a lot of the so-called facts about bear hunting are bullshit. And I think anytime you hear a fact from a guide, it's likely that outfitter is saying something to make it sound better. And what I mean by that is an outfitter will tell you, those bears there, they know you're there. They smell you. It doesn't matter what wind it is. Because what are they going to tell you? Sit in camp for 5 days because the wind's wrong? So if you only got a 5-day hunt, you're not going to hunt. You're going to want your money back if you're only hunting 3 days or 2 days, right? So they'll tell you to hunt every day. Where I wouldn't do that. I'd skip around. I'd go hunt a different bait, or I'll have extra baits for that in case that happens, right? But they have all these things like you drive into the bait. When we leave, the bear comes in, and that happens occasionally with big bears, especially if you're in some place like Canada where they're half starved. But in down here in the pressured areas, these bears are a lot shyer than that. They know what that ATV means, and you'll get the young bears, the small ones, to come in right after the ATV leaves. Like the 2 to 5 year olds. Those older ones are smarter than that. You were talking about volume of bait and stuff, and it varies so much. The rules, the laws, and the way you hunt in the different states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota are so different in them ways. Now, I'm not going to say too much about Michigan because I haven't been up there yet. I've got a ton of points, but most of my hunting is in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I struggle way more than Minnesota because Wisconsin is set up for like outfitters. And what I mean is you're only allowed to use 2 5-gallon buckets, and they start baiting in April. And you got guys that bait right from the beginning. And if you got to compete with that, it is very hard. When you got a job and you have to drive to the bear hunting areas and stuff like that, it's very hard. But in Minnesota, the law says you don't start bait until August 15th. And then you start hunting on September 1st. That's only 3 weeks. It makes it easier for a do-it-yourself guy. And there's no limit on how much bait you put out. So literally in Minnesota, I do way, way better than Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I struggle unless I get somebody to bait for me. And then when I come up to hunt, there's a new human scent. That new human scent spooks them. That's like a lot of guys think that they can parade your buddy in there and show them their baits and stuff. You just blew it. I mean, you just told those mature bears something's changed. They do not like change. Minnesota, when we go up there, I drive 8 hours one way to bait. I'm hunting real close to Canada, and 8 hours one way, and I do it 3 times. And when I go up there, I put several barrels of bait at each spot, and I use a real wide variety. I've got cookies in there, and I've got nuts in there, and I've got breads in there, and donuts in there, and cereals, and all kinds of stuff, granola, and I mix this bait really well and give them everything a bear could want. And what I find and I see on the cameras, remember the cameras are a tool that teaches you, is these bears, there are some stuff they really like most bears like donuts. For whatever reason, they like sweet bread, right? But you find some bears go straight to the nuts, only eat nuts. Some bears just want the donuts. Some bears just want this or that, just like people. Some bears come in one day they eat this, one day they eat that. So that variety is huge. Just like you don't eat McDonald's all week, every single day. One day you're going to want to, have something decent to eat, right? So, the goal in putting that huge amount of bait out, which is another one of those myths that outfitters will tell you, you just want to feed them just enough. Otherwise they'll be nocturnal. Bullshit. I'm shooting in the middle of the day and I'm putting out as much bait as I can. So, I'll have this giant pile of bait out there and I'll have good bait. And when I get up to that northern Minnesota area, most of these guys are baiting with crap. You see them in the campgrounds and stuff, and you look at their bait, and they got stuff like used food from restaurants and stuff like spaghetti and meatballs and stuff. I mean, like, geez, you putting on your bait? I'm using premium stuff. And then the thing I do is scents. A lot of people don't understand this, but a bear has what they call a vomer nasal organ. And a deer has this too, in case you didn't know that. But they can separate odors. So when they smell stuff, they don't smell like me and you. And the way humans work is they think like a human. This is how you smell, right? But a bear smells by separating odors. So when they smell like a cake, they smell the flour. They smell the ingredients of the frosting. They smell each individual piece. So they trigger on scent. So most guys use an oil-based scent. It's pretty common now. Some guys are cheap and they use vanilla extract spray mixed with water. But most people use an oil-based scent. So I try to get all the common scents that are out there, like the licorice, the anise, the cherry, the vanilla, and then I'll get the vanilla that you mix with water too. And I will use every one of those sprays. I would take all this variety of sprays, and I'll use each one of them. And they are very expensive. I mean, these bottles are $25 a bottle or something like that. And I'll use good stuff like Bear Scents. That's a brand. And I will spray a little bit of each bottle, not a lot, but into the wood, up into the trees and stuff, and get each odor out there. And the reason you do that is because those bears will have a memory. Like they've all been hitting baits, throughout their life, because all these areas are baited. So they'll remember some bait that had some really good food or something that they liked, that they had anise on it. When they smell that anise, they'll be like, oh, that's that guy from last year. And that'll draw them in because they smell those baits for 10 miles. So if they smell something they really want, they will travel to it and eat it. But they're not really smelling the food as much that far. They're smelling those scents that you put out. So scents are really important for getting those baits going and getting those bears to find the baits.
So when you're talking about the different smells of the different people, of the different things, obviously you're very much involved in the mobile hunting world. Are you setting presets at these places, or are you hanging and hunting each set?
Well, to stay within the limits of the law, I put the stand up every time I go in and pull it down every time.
Okay.
The only time I would differ from that is if I have a bear right around me and I think I could sneak out of there. Like it left and it's a good bear. I don't really want to spook it, or I'm hearing something in the woods, but I've run out of time and I want to get out of there before he comes in. Then I might leave the stand there and sneak out. That's the exception. But usually I'm hanging and hunting every time.
Okay. And then, so it's just so much, like for trying to break this down, trying to figure it out. How in these places that are heavily bear hunted, and you said that these bears are very smart. They've been baited. They're pressured probably in a much different way than we think deer are pressured. How does the dog hunting affect bait hunters?
It's funny because a lot of people tell you there's no effect. Some people tell you there's a little effect, but there's definitely an effect. Some of the bears will come back. Some of them will get real edgy around the baits. Some of them won't. They get chased off of most of the baits by dogs. In the areas I'm hunting Wisconsin nowadays, you can't legally hunt bears with dogs, but you can train with dogs. And they train with dogs up to about 9 days before the season. And it's just not enough time, and those guys will find your baits if you're close to a road. So what I have to do is I have to find places where they don't want to run their dogs, like alongside of an expressway, really remote into the woods, because if it's near a road, the bears are going to cross the road by the bait. They're going to leave scent, and those dogs will run right to your baits, find your bait, because all the scent trails will lead there. Not only that, but if the wind blows from the bait to the road, the hounds will smell the bears on the bait and sound. So you don't want to be alongside those logging roads, 100 yards in or 200 yards in or something. If those guys are running those with dogs, that does make a difference. And those dogs will chase those bears forever out of there. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to go back to something where somebody's trying to kill me in my eyes. A bear ain't no different. And if you're hunting a bear that's 400, 500 pounds, he's going to have a hard time outrunning dogs. And when he learns some places where the dogs are going to go after him, I don't think he's going to want to come back. So I'm going to look for areas that are really rural where you're back further than the dogs can smell, or you're going to be going in from an expressway, a highway. They do not want their dogs running next to traffic going 50 miles an hour. All those guys will tell you the same thing. No, we don't run our dogs from those roads, because if they run across that highway, they're going to get killed, and they love their dogs. So that's some ways I combat it. But I've had several cases where I had really good bears coming in, and then some guy runs a dog there. You get a dog on the camera, and then the guy starts dropping the dogs there every day because he's running bears, and you just watch those baits just go dead. And most dog hunters are pretty good guys, but you run into some doozies sometimes. I mean, some guys will look for your baits,
So in that instance, you're saying earlier how, the cameras are a learning tool, and you're seeing these dogs on the cameras, you're seeing all of this stuff happen. Do you then try to find a completely different area? Do you pivot like you would with a big buck and say, okay, if I was a bear and somebody was trying to kill me, where would I go? Like, how do you navigate that?
Well, let's just say it like this. You got to do it right before the season starts, because you got to have those baits going before the season starts. Starting a bait in season and hoping to kill a bear off it is pretty difficult. But you adjust the next year, so it's a learning cycle, and you get good spots. They get better the more you bait them. But you get spots that are mediocre, or they're problematic. Your best bet is to dump those and just keep running new spots. So like if I got as many baits as I could handle a little bit more, I'll be out trying some new spots, and I won't dump spots until I find a spot that's better. You know what I mean? I'll just keep upgrading. But it's kind of weird when you bait a spot, it becomes a spot that bears know for food. And every year they seem to get a little bit more accustomed to coming into there. And you'll get the same bears that come in. In Minnesota, these days I'm getting a tag about once every 4 or 5 years. And it's amazing to me that the same baits will have the same bears on them that were there 5 years ago. They have the same markings, same bear, the same bit off ear. And that just amazes me. And you'll have a bait that's a quarter mile, half mile away that has a whole different set of bears. That bear never hits that bait. But 4 years later, the same bait, the same bear will come back. As soon as he smells that you're baiting that again, he'll be right back in there. When you do new spots are it's hard to get a bear to trust it. That's where Wisconsin has a little bit of an advantage if you can keep up with the baiting, because you can start baiting in April. You got a lot longer time for them to get accustomed to it. Like in Minnesota, when we bait, we're baiting 3 weeks before season. So when we put the bait out, it takes about 3 days for bears to start hitting it. But you'll occasionally get bears right away circling it. You catch it on the camera in the background, and what it is all those bears know that bait's there. They're afraid of it when you first put it out, Mm-hmm. And then by the time that you get close to the end of the week, all of a sudden those bears are just, once they start coming in, you'll get a gazillion bears coming in. Say if you're in a good area, you'll get 6 or 10 bears coming in, and then all of a sudden it'll slow way down, and one big bear will be showing up, and then the little ones will be sneaking in and won't be as active. So if you're not running a camera, a very active bait that slows down is usually a good sign.
So in those instances, like, how does it differ from deer hunting? I mean, to think of things because I feel like most guys aren't, unless they grew up bear hunting or something, they're not as far along in this. So what are the differences from like bear hunting to deer hunting, or things that you can't do bear hunting that you can do deer hunting, or vice versa?
Well, deer hunting, it's, for me, it's really about figuring out where they're at, looking at the tracks, the trails, the rubs, the bedding areas and stuff, and targeting them. It's very hard to do that with a bear. They don't leave tracks. They have a padded foot. There's padded trails that you I think this is a bear trail. You know what I mean? You can find sign, you can find flip rocks, you find torn open ant hills and stuff, that you have a hard time determining bear size by that. And the thing about, like, if you did hunt them just like on a food source, say, like a lot of times you'll be like, you go out and you'll find like a clear cut, and there's a lot of bear poop in there and some berries and stuff. Say you set up a net for a bear. Your odds are pretty low at killing one doing that. But if you do, if the bear's just kind of passing through and stuff, a lot of times those bears, you got a quick opportunity to take the bear, right? Mm-hmm. At a bait site, you got opportunity and time to make sure there's not cubs. There's time to look at the bear, to eye them up. You got them coming to a spot where you're predetermined. You're not trying to shoot into brush and stuff. So the bait site kind of helps you in making sure that you're doing an ethical harvest on the right bear, and not shooting undersized bears. So deer, it's really more about, I'm sure bait would work the same way with a deer if you did it right? But that's not my cup of tea with the deer. I like it with the bears because it's kind of a necessity to hunt them, if you want to do them this way. And the bears are a little different too, where I think they're a lot more intelligent than a deer. Where I don't think a lot of people realize that. They think they're just like goofy and they can run into the bait like Yogi Bear or something, but they don't. The mature bears are pretty smart. And, they live to be 20, 25 years old. And when they're doing that in areas with heavy pressure where there's, 2 baits every mile, those bears know exactly what's up, So it's just way harder to hunt a bear over trails and things like that.
And so for like one other thing about bear baiting in proximity, I guess, is like for someone like me, where we've got a big piece of private land, which you would think is big, by most people's standards. How far away are you putting bait sites from one another?
That's a good question, because I've heard some people say you never put them, within a mile of each other. I think a lot of times for me, it's like you look at the terrain, and the terrain will tell you how far you can put them apart. I'm thinking about some spots I have in Minnesota that are actually fairly close. And some of them, we didn't even know they were that close until we actually looked at it on an aerial, because you come in from a different way around, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, holy crap, we're actually pretty close to the other one, you know what I'm saying? But, you get on one swamp, and then the next swamp over, say, is a quarter mile, and you got a whole different set of bears coming in. And sometimes you get the same ones. And if you do, you probably want to shut one of them down. You know what I mean? But you start to learn you can get away with some of them being closer than you think. And we've actually had baits that aren't doing well. And instead of abandoning the area, we move over, say, 600 yards to the next point, and all of a sudden that's the best bait in the world. They're real picky about where they come into a bait. And sometimes it's really hard to put your finger on exactly why they don't like a certain spot.
Now, you talked a little bit in the beginning about setting up your bait sites like close to swamps and grass and a little bit of like points and stuff. But like, if we're thinking about, bears and like travel patterns and stuff like that, how big of a deal is like a terrain feature, like a ridge line connecting two swamps or something like that, which we would look at normally for deer, like, oh, they could be bedded here, they could be bedded here, and this is where they're going to go through. How does that play into like bear activity?
Yeah, I could care less.
Okay.
About ridges. So everything I'm doing is based on where can a bear hole up. So I'm looking for swamps, and the big swamps, remote swamps, clear cuts that are up against the swamp where it's really thick will be a lot of food. They got to have like a food source around, like hardwoods and stuff. You don't want to go put a bear bait in the middle of pines. You know what I mean? It's got to be someplace where they got some sort of food. They got some reason to be there, right? So you can get like fast hits. Like if you're baiting close to the season, you don't have much going on. Where you'd put baits is like the upwind side of a swamp, a giant swamp. Any bear in that swamp's going to smell your bait then. But then you have the issue of, how you hunt that for a crosswind or something. But just putting it next to one of them swamps and let it waft around during the night helps too. Like I got a thing too I do with like delayed scents. And what I mean by that is like I take Kool-Aid, like those cans of Kool-Aid. And I really like the fruit punch one, and I'll sprinkle the powder all over the bait logs and all over the ground around the bait. And it's just dry, and it doesn't have a lot of odor until at night when the dew comes on, and all of a sudden that odor just takes off. And that's done well for me. But you got to get them to smell it, you know what I mean? So I do think they travel through those swamps, and they travel the shortest distance between the swamps. They travel up into those hardwoods to eat and stuff. I even see that they travel the seldom used logging roads, like the old ones that are just pretty much used for logging. They'll travel those quite a bit. They'll stay on them, but that's not where you should bait them. If you're baiting those, or you're baiting those like where three ridges come together and stuff, I think you're going to have a lot of nocturnal bears.
Okay.
I think you get the bears in daylight by putting it where they can move in the shadows, in the swamps, in the cool areas, in the heat of the day, and have a very short distance to go out of cover to get to your bait.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess the basis of the question was like, if they're able to smell those oil-based scents 10 miles away, you're going to bring them in. You're just saying you don't care how they get there. You want them to find it, and then you want it to be in a spot where they can stay there.
Yeah, where they feel comfortable being, yes.
Okay.
You can get a bear to go into anywhere. You can put the bait in the middle of an open hardwoods, and you'll have bears hit it. Good luck killing one of them. You know what I mean? So the placement of the bait is critical to killing them and to getting them to come in daylight.
Okay. So I feel like that right there could be like one of the better pieces of information in there, because, if you're getting you put your bait out and then you leave for a week or whatever, 10 days, and you got bears all over. And then you're like, well, I don't understand why I'm killing them. I guess that's kind of like the way that we think about the way that baiting deer goes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Not the last time I went up to Minnesota, but the time before that, which is about like 8 years ago or so. I don't know if you know Tyler Witt. He came along that year.
Okay.
And we had a couple other people. And we had there's a lot of illegal outfitters in Minnesota. These fly-by-night guys. I don't know what they got to do for a license, but I think they have a hard time getting an outfitter license, so they just don't get a license. I think they got to have like, life-saving training and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys come up and they don't have licenses, and wardens are always out to get them. And they'll claim everybody's their friend. Well, I had one of those illegal outfitters next to me. They're everywhere up there. They're rampant. So this guy had 12 clients, and he runs guys through there every year. I was talking to some of the clients and even him, and he had 12 clients, and nobody was seeing bears, shooting bears, and a whole bunch of them had told me that their baits haven't even been hit. And he said that he didn't guarantee it because it's really hard to get them to hit the baits. And meanwhile, me, Tyler, Steve, and John were just slaying them. We were passing bears, and we had 3 bears down. I still had to get mine. I was being kind of picky. And those guys hadn't shot a bear, and they're starting to mute, get angry at the guide and stuff because we were doing so well and we were in the same area camping. And there was like these wars going on. This other outfitter base came over and sabotaged some of their stuff, and I didn't want to get involved in that. And I was trying to keep this guy happy, so I called him over and I said, hey, we got to close down our baits. I got one bait that's got a whole bunch of bears coming in, and I have to close it. Why don't you take that bait and put one of these guys on, and they'll get a bear, and then maybe your guys will be a little happier. And he goes, well, you do that? I says, yeah. So I take him over, I show him the bait. And that night he comes back, he comes over and he says, hey, I want to thank you. We finally got a bear off that bait you sent us to. I said, well, cool. I says, who shot it? Well, guess what? The outfitter shot it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. What a piece of crap, eh?
Jeez.
So I just said, yeah, congrats, And then it was 2, they shot the first 110-pound rat that came in. But anywho, the wardens came over to do a bust on them, and they'd been over a few times. They'd already checked us and seen the 3 bears we'd shot. And that night I shot a monster bear, 15-year-old, 400-pound bear. And 400 pounds up there is a lot bigger than like in Wisconsin, because there's no acorns up there. They're not baiting all year. There's, no crops. It's just forest. So they're lean. But anyway, I got this absolute monster. And we get it back to camp and had it in the freezer. We got a freezer, and we bring a generator up there and fire up a generator, and we cut the bears up immediately and put them in a freezer. So anywho, the warden's coming to do a bust on this outfitter, and he's over there, claiming they're all his friends from all over the country. and they're checking his bear out and stuff. And he says something to him about, well, that guy over there told me I could hunt his bait or whatever. And he goes, you should be talking to him, not us. How are they shooting 4 bears out of 4 guys? And the Northwoods is so quiet.
Mm-hmm.
You can, through the silence, you hear the warden go, they got another one? All of a sudden you hear him walking up the gravel towards us, and they walk into our camp, and the warden says, you get another bear? I says, yeah, I tagged out today. We're leaving in the morning. He was saying, I see the bear. So he's like, holy crap, that's a really big bear for up here, he says. And he goes, well, what the hell are you guys up to? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's checking our licenses. You'd already checked our licenses twice. And he goes, what are you guys up to? He goes, there's no way you're killing these bears like this. And I go, I don't know. We know what we're doing. And he says, well, I'm going to tell you something. I think he said the number was 7. There's been 7 bears shot in this entire unit out of all these people. It's been the worst year ever. And you're responsible for 4 of them here, and you put that guy on one too. So I'm doing pretty good. So it's working for me,
No, absolutely. And this is a super fun conversation because I I could be wrong, but I don't feel like you get to talk about this very much.
I don't, and I got a lot of passion in it. But you know what? There's just not a lot of bear hunters out there that, it's a smaller number than the deer hunters. Let's put it like that, So when you do a podcast, you do a show or something on bears, a lot of people could care less. But I love it. I love bear hunting.
Yeah, and I've gotten that from you, just talking to you a little bit. And like I said, it's funny that there's two guys in my town here when we talk about like, oh, we went over and did Dan's seminar, and they're like, Dan Infalt, like one of the guys hunted with you in Minnesota, and the other one I think hunted deer with you. But they're like, you need to ask him about hunting bears. Like, you need to say, okay, yeah. So with bears and like shot placement and like tracking them, all of that stuff. Like, how does that differ from deer? Because you hear about like, okay, you need to shoot them a little bit further back, like a little bit more center of center. But then everybody talks about like the blood being, more difficult because it gets trapped in the hair and the fat and all of that stuff. So what's different from your end on that?
Well, for me, bears seem to go down really fast. If you hit them right, they don't not go far at all. A lot less distance than a deer. A lot of times they go down within sight. You do seem to have a bigger area to aim. You don't have to just hug that shoulder, which if you hit a shoulder, it's going to stop your arrow. I mean, on a mature bear, it's like hitting a log. They're pretty solid. Matter of fact, that one of the last real big ones I shot had a 12 gauge slug in its shoulder.
Jeez.
It looked like it was a good placement, going in from the front, aiming towards the vitals. It didn't get through the shoulder. So how are you going to get an arrow through that, right?
Right, exactly.
But there usually ain't a lot of blood with bears. If you get a lot of blood, they're going down pretty quick. But most of them, I want to say 40 or 50 yards. If they get over 100 yards, usually you're not finding them. Unless it's a gut hit or something like that, then you're waiting. But yeah, I mean, you can aim a little further back, like you could be 4 inches behind that shoulder. You don't have to hug it. You know what I mean? You got the lungs and stuff are exposed further back, which makes it a lot easier. The other thing I would say too is, which might raise an eyebrow on you, is they die a lot faster with a bow than a gun. I don't know why. I have no idea. With deer, that shock of a bullet seems to like really put them down fast. With bears, you hit them with a bow, they go down pretty quick, but you hit them with a gun and they seem to get a little further. And I don't know why. I don't know, again, I was talking to some other bear experts about that, like Mike Foss, who's guided hundreds and hundreds of people. And he told me he believes it's the sound of the gun that spooks them so hard they run faster and further, and they don't just lope like when they're bow shot. I don't know.
That's kind of wild. Now, while you're bear hunting, one of the things, you talked about a couple of different times where it seemed like you shot these bears middle of the day. Like, I think most people would think like, oh, we just hunt bears in the evening. They don't come out because it's hot, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as like timing, when you go to the stand, when you're hunting them, like what's that process like?
Yeah, I pretty much let the cameras tell me. I never hunt mornings because you're chasing the bears out of there unless a camera tells me I have to. Like sometimes you'll get the occasional bear that'll come in every day at 9 a.m. Well, then you better be in there in the morning. But for the most part, if you go in the mornings, that bear's right around there someplace. You're chasing them out of there. It's dead quiet. You're making noise getting in there. Where in the evening, there's bird noise, wind noise, all that crap. You can get in there. You're laying down. For the most part, what the cameras show me is the bears come in the evening. But they tend to come in, I don't know, like an hour or two earlier than you typically see deer. I don't usually see them right up till dark. It's usually earlier than that. But I have seen them right at dark. But probably the last 2 or 3 hours of daylight. But you certainly don't want to be getting in there like 2 hours before dark, because you might be walking into bears in there. So the cameras a lot of times show me that bears will occasionally hit like 1, 2 in the afternoon, or 3, 4 in the afternoon, and then when it starts to get in that 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the afternoon, then it starts really getting pounded. But if your bear comes in there every now and then randomly during the day, and you're sitting in camp, eating a bologna sandwich, and then you walk out there and spook it out of there, you're done. A lot of these really big bears, if you jump them at the bait, it's over. They get really, really nocturnal. They get, they start circling the bait. A lot of times they just never come back to that bait. So you really don't want to screw up.
What happens if there's a sow and cubs, or if there's a small bear, or if a bear comes in like right when you're about to get down, like in that darkness time frame when you're trying not to blow these bears out, but you don't want to, you can't sit up there all night.
If it's a little bear, I don't give a shit. Just chase them out. If it's a target bear, I'm going to try and wait them out. Okay.
And how long are you waiting? Because you said that these bears really don't go that far.
Yeah, well, they don't. They when they come in the evening, they eat pretty quick. But you could be stuck in a stand for half an hour. They don't really stay at those baits very long. Even on the cameras, you see that. You do get the occasional bear that'll come in there and just lay in that bait and eat, and just lay around like some fat dude, just burping, farting, and shoveling the crap in for an hour or two. So you do get that, but it almost seems more like they're just owning the bait, at that point. The ones that come in and feed seem to feed quick and move on.
So when is your next bear hunt? When are you going to draw a tag again?
So I got a tag for Wisconsin this year, and I have a tag for Minnesota that I'll get next year, because I think I could have drew this year, but I put it off to hunt Wisconsin this year.
Okay. And so so you can start, you said August 15th?
So Minnesota, I can start August 15th, and hunting starts September 1st. Wisconsin, we're already baiting.
Okay. And
so now I'm not baiting my own baits in Wisconsin anymore, though.
Okay.
Because it's a 2-hour ride for me, and what I was getting at before, and I don't think I went into it very detailed, but in Wisconsin, you can only put out 2 5-gallon buckets, and they eat that in a day. Mm-hmm. And if you run out of bait, those bears leave. They go someplace else, just other baits. So you don't want to run out of bait. So you have to be baiting like either every day or every other day at least.
So in that instance with you, what you had said earlier about the different smells and running the bears out of there, how do you mitigate that with having somebody else bait for you?
Well, I ask them to just have him bait and him only. And when I go in there, I've already gone out there, looked at the baits, set them up. And as a matter of fact, for me, he's baiting my baits. I went up there, and I used to hunt up there, and I have areas I like and spots I like and certain bears I'm after, and I have him baiting those baits for me. So when I go in there, I'm not going to walk over to that bait. I'm going to have him continue to bait it, and I'm just going to take that trail up to my tree, and that's it. I'm not going to go over, poke around, see what the bait looks like, reset the bait, that kind of crap. I'm going to sit back at that tree and go up there. So my scent is as minimal as possible.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
But now if you go with an outfitter or something, or you have somebody else baiting for, and you have to take over on the baiting when you get there a couple days earlier, take over on the baiting, but take the exact same path, do the exact same thing. And hopefully the bear is okay with that. Some are, some aren't.
Okay. Like I say, this has been amazing listening to all of this, and obviously you're, I would say, an above average, at the very humblest hunter across the board. And I think that translates into like the way that you approach probably all hunting. If you were coyote hunting, you'd probably do the same thing. But like what for bears, kind of like to close this out, like what do you think is like the most like the keys to your success, like the paramount things that you do differently than everybody else?
Exactly where the bait is placed, I think, is one of the biggest keys. Having a backup plan, having more than one spot. You know what I mean? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And having quality bait, I think is key. Those are the big ones.
And so is it easy for you to come across the bait and see that it's poorly done? Like, just like any deer stand that you walk by and you say, okay, well, this guy's not killing anything, you know, walking through the woods.
I have looked at people's baits and critiqued them, but I try not to. Okay. When I do that, it's usually by invitation. If I see somebody's bait or I know it's there, I won't go over and look at it because I wouldn't want somebody doing that to me. Although I get that occasionally, but, so I try not to go look at other people's baits unless I'm invited to do so, you know, but when I do, I often have some critique. Usually the critique is that one of the biggest failures is you go up and you set up a tree stand 2 or 3 days before you're going to hunt or the day before you're going to hunt, and then come back the next day to hunt these bears, and you think you're going to get away with that. They're going to smell where you're in that tree. You're spending too much time in there. You're in a new spot. A lot of guys will go to an outfitter. They get in there. They go set up a tree stand. They go put a camera over the bait. And that changes a lot. Now, the hardest thing to explain is it's so different in every place you go. Like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan would be very pressured areas. But some guys are hunting like go up and do a trip in Canada. And hell, you could put rice out for bait. You'd kill bears. You'd have bears coming from everywhere, you know. So it's not apples to apples everywhere you go. And people get in this lull of thinking they can get away with certain things. But if you hunt in the same manner we hunt here, when you went to Canada, oh my God, would you kill the bears there? You know what I mean? But nobody takes it serious there. They can go out and put a bait out and kill a bear. I mean, even when you go to these outfitters in Canada, which I haven't, I've never gone to Canada, but you look at how they're setting up. They're building tree stands out of sticks and crap and 2x4s and stuff. They're so cheap, and then they're spending, you know, they're charging you $5,000 for a hunt. But, you know, whatever.
So have you ever hunted them off the ground?
I have not. We had a guy that did, and when I did a camp in Minnesota one time, one of the guys that came up there, he only came up for 1 year. He wanted to hunt his off the ground because he wanted video of hunting it off the ground. And I told him the setup he was in, I didn't think it was a good idea because his scent is going to pool right to the bear. And he set up there, and the bear was coming in, and it was a pretty good bear. We had it on camera, and hit his scent pool and took off. You know, you get down below that canopy of leaves. Remember that early season, you know, there's a canopy, you know, you get down in there, and that scent just seems to stay at that ground level. And it gets so hard to get away with crap on the ground. I'd really rather be in a tree.
And so, like, in a perfect world, like if you could, like, say on private land, preset your tree stand, that would be the way to go, so that you didn't have to worry about that. Or
if it's private land and you're going to put a tree stand in there, I'd put it in the day you start your bait. I'd put it in right away.
Okay.
And then I'd walk to that tree every time I walk to the bait, just so that when you go out there to hunt, you're not putting your scent someplace where you haven't been walking. It's not a bad idea because you're going to make noises setting that tree stand up and down, but just have it up in that tree on that private land well in advance.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what we'll end up doing, but I think I'm going to have to start looking in a bigger area. You know, we're in an area where, I mean, I've got 3 or 4 different bears on camera just by accident already this year, without any baits or anything like that. But the property is like half a mile, 3/4 of a mile across. So we can put out 3 baits a person we're gonna have 2 hunters, so we can venture out. Well, that's what
I'd look at some of the public around you too. Have one on your property and try some other spots too.
Yeah, that's one of the other things I was going to ask you is with this. You're trying to be close to these swamps and all that sort of stuff. Does ag affect that, or like crop rotations or anything? I had heard someone say that there was bear really like to eat corn and yada.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, corn can really be a draw. I mean, they love corn. They love acorns too. A good bait will probably hold them even if that stuff's around. But starting that bait near a cornfield that's being hit by bears would be a good thing. Or, starting a bait where you've found bear sign. Like a lot of times we'll be driving logging roads and we'll hit some big bear tracks by a mud puddle or something. And it's like, okay, we're setting a bait here. If you find bear sign, that's great. I had a friend years ago. Now he's old and crippled, can't hunt no more. Really old, like he's like 90. But years ago in Minnesota, they used to give you 2 bear tags in the non-quota area. You could shoot 2 bears, and you just buy them over the counter. And him and a buddy went there, met some guy in a bar who had a farm. And he said he could hunt their farm, that he had a lot of bears in it that were causing problems. So they went over there and they looked at his cornfield, and there's just these heavy trails going into this cornfield. And there's stalks along the trail where those bears were dragging the corn out. And he set up a stand on one of the trails. The other guy set up a stand on other main trail. And the first day they both shot a bear. And by the end of the week, they both had their 2 bears. So they shot 4 bears just in trails going into the corn. And they came back the next year, did the same thing. And then like the 3rd year, the guy kicked them out. He had somebody offer him money, but some outfitter or something. But they were actually able to shoot them on a bear trail and do really well by a cornfield. They love corn.
Yeah. And again, like never in a million years until you ask somebody about bear hunting, would that be something that I thought was an option, like, something that I'd have to consider.
But think of this too. Knowing that they love corn and stuff, and me being the type of guy who has to experiment with everything and try everything, right? I put corn in my baits. They don't touch it. They eat everything else. So they prefer the bait you're putting out there over the corn. I put acorns in the bait. They don't really eat them. They eat everything around them. So if you got a really good bait, they'll prefer that over those wild things. But what's going on is they go to things like acorns. They go to things like corn to look for food. So putting your bait where they historically go already to look for food, they're going to find your bait.
Right. And they can probably, they're like, well, I know where the corn is. I know where the acorns are, but I don't know how long this is going to be here. Just like berries or whatever else,
Yeah. One thing I would say is if you're getting onto public land, get remote with the baits. Most of the bear baits around, probably the majority of them will be guys that are baiting for somebody else or guiding. And even the guys that do it yourself, most of them are going to try and be efficient. And they put their baits like within 100 yards of the road, 100, 150 yards of the road. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get remote and you can handle taking the bait that far, getting away from the roads is paramount. So if you got an area that's got a lot of pressure, as bear hunters every quarter mile down the road have baits in there, just off of the roads, which is very common. But you got a swamp back in that woods a ways. You can literally get up to that swamp edge, and every bear coming out of that swamp will hit your bait before it goes to theirs.
Okay. Yeah, I'm already going over maps in my mind of okay, where was that cranberry bog or whatever? How can I get? But man, this has been a lot of fun. I hear a difference in your voice, talking about bears than talking about, kind of, I guess you talk about whitetail deer hunting and bed hunting so much that this has got to be, have been kind of refreshing,
Yeah, it is. It is. I have a lot of passion in bears, and you don't get to talk about it much. And I also think that a lot of this knowledge ain't out there. It's like deer hunting, even with there was a time when I gave the secrets to hunting mobile and stuff when they hadn't been heard, and it was exciting. Now it's like everybody knows everything. It's already out there. The people I've taught have taught people. It's like going rampant, but not too many people know the secrets with bears. And a lot of the guys that give secrets give kind of false secrets, because mainly the people who are doing seminars about bears or writing articles about bears are outfitters, and they're giving a biased view so they sell hunts. Like I said before with the those bears should come in on any wind. They know you're there, that kind of crap. It just drives me nuts. You read some of that stuff or you hear some of those things. You talk to some real bearmen that know, and they're always amazed that you kind of like Mike Foss. When I first met him and I started talking bears with him, now he was a real well-known outfitter for shooting huge bears, and he starts telling me how he won't let his clients go to the baits. He makes them stay back because the bears will smell them and stuff. So we started talking, and here he like knew everything I knew, and it was like a eye opening. There's very few people out there that have that knowledge. So that's what's exciting about this, is talking about stuff that people really haven't heard.
Oh yeah, and we talk about it a lot, like amongst our friend group and everything, but like a lot of this stuff is just like in an echo chamber, and like people who, especially with the deer hunting stuff, like that don't know or they haven't experienced it, but they know all the terminology, they know everything. So you can't, you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know, what their history is, but they're saying all the same stuff. Like they can repeat everything that you've taught in any of your videos, like verbatim, but they haven't been in the woods to like do it.
Right.
And so this information, I mean, I guess like what you had just said is kind of like the way I feel like deer hunting was like when you started talking about this, where, this information is stuff that like I've been trying to like dig and try and find some information, and there isn't, you're right, there isn't a ton of it out there.
Yeah.
So so I saw something. I thought you were going out east to do a seminar or something.
I'm going out to a show. I'm going to do some seminars out there next week called Hunt Stock. It's in Massachusetts.
And you're going to be up there. Is that the one where Hal Blood's going to be there?
Yeah, Hal Blood's going to be there. Barry Wenzel's going to be there. I think that's cool as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Eberhardt's going to be there. They really get a good lineup.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel about going into something like that, being with those guys? Do you feel like amongst your peers, like I feel like a lot of times at the shows you're talking to, a lot of fans, a lot of people who, want to, pick your brain or show you this buck or that buck. But like you said, it's going to be really cool to be with Barry Wenzel, or maybe Gene Wenzel, which I'm not sure, but Hal Blood, that guy's, killed a lot of bears, tracked a lot of bucks, like really cool stuff. And obviously, John a little bit, so.
yeah, it's it'll be different because the guys out there hunt different, and like I had Hal Blood had me on his he's got a little podcast, and he had me on there I don't know, like 6 months ago or so. And it was funny because we were talking about, he was asking me how I do this bed hunting and stuff. And he kind of hesitated when I was talking about it. He goes, that stuff works out in the Midwest there. He goes, but out here it doesn't work because of the big woods and stuff. He goes, you can't figure out where they bed or anything. And I'm like, I know people that do it out by you. I know one of his friends that hunts beds out there and kills big bucks right where he hunts. So those guys got like a mindset, you know what I mean? But that's what we had here when I started this stuff. People had that same mindset. You still get that on the fringes, like way down south and stuff. People would be like, that don't work down here. But there's plenty of people already doing it down there, But I do have a pretty good fan base on the East Coast that's never gotten to see me. So it's going to be fun to go out there because I've never gone out to the East Coast and done anything.
Awesome. Well, I'm really appreciate you coming on here and kind of going through this with me and talking about it. So I really appreciate your time, Dan. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot.
Bow hunting all comes down to a moment. And in the moment, you want equipment on your bow that will get the job done. Trophy Ridge products are the tools bow hunters trust. React technology sights, rests, stabilizers, and quivers to help a bow hunter be successful in the field. And those tools are from Trophy Ridge.
Hit the road for fun and heartwarming fishing adventures with the Real American Road Trip.
I just want to hook up one time. I just need to hook up one time.
Catch the Waypoint Original Series every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on the Waypoint TV channel. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.
I did get a bite. I have gotten a bite. I did feel it.